Prepare thine ears, prepare thine bum. For the Things We Think About podcast has come. Now for your hosts, Kenny and Aaron.
Hello. This is Aaron, and this is Things We Think About with Aaron and Kenny. We are sans Kenny this week. I believe he is on vacation. He did not disclose where, but I'm going to guess that he's preparing for the Area 51 infiltration that is going to happen. I wish him well. Not sure why he'd risk that much for an internet meme, but, he's just a crazy guy. And this is what I chose in my podcast hosting. So, anywho, I just want to start off the show by saying thank you to everybody out there who listened to episode 4. That's been our highest played episode. Cameron was an amazing guest, and we had a great conversation. I hope for many more like it. So yeah, a little housekeeping here. I just wanted to give a shout out to our Reddit people out there. We made a thread in RX Mormon, and it seemed to go over well. And it's been just wonderful to have that community to fall back on and to kind of mine for interesting stories and things to talk about. I mean, it's a great place, and I hope we can keep it going. Quick shout out to the Facebook page too, if you can throw that a like, and throw a like to the YouTube. And it's not much right now. Of course, we're still trying to get this thing going and figure out the best way to go. One of the interesting things I think is figuring out how to be a marketer and a creator at the same time. You kind of have to be both in this day and age. So just kind of figuring out the minutia of the marketing. It's a pain in the ass, but it's a necessary evil. Also want to mention all the places that you can get the podcast. So normally I'll throw out the Anchor link, and that is a great link because it gives you the Spotify and the Apple Podcast links, which are the two of the main ones. I'm looking into doing the other ones, but I feel like those are the biggest ones. Please follow on Spotify and subscribe on the Apple Podcasts. I know a lot of people have iPhones out there, and it's really simple. One thing I'll mention here, I just want to throw out that you can actually record voice messages on Anchor, and we actually got one totally out of the blue, and let me just go ahead and play it for you.
Hey guys, I started listening to your podcast. I guess Aaron gave me a link, and I love your podcast so far. And I don't really listen to podcasts, but I think I'm going to listen to yours for a little bit. So good job. Keep it up, and you have a subscriber.
So yeah, wow. That's amazing. Thank you for sending that in. Thank you, Peaches. That really is, I really do appreciate that. Anytime anybody wants to chime in, send a message, anything like that. We've got our Things We Think About. And you can email us now at thingswethinkaboutpodcast@gmail.com. Like I said, leave the message on the Anchor. Tons of ways to get in contact. We really want to make this as communal of a show as we can. We want to be as interactive with our audience as we can. So today we've got on Jeremiah. He's an old friend of both me and Kenny. And one big thing we have in common is the love of bicycles and bicycling. And we're both bike commuters, and you'll hear that. So without further ado, here's Jeremiah. I appreciate you taking the time to be on our quaint little show. It's like a little cottage in the middle of nowhere right now, Which I think of it as in my mind.
Right. I was going to say, which is, I suppose, fitting given collectively where you and I are both at in that line of thinking. Like, I'm in the middle of LA. I'm in the most. LA itself is very, very dense population-wise, as you could probably imagine. But I'm in a neighborhood that is just. It is people on top of people on top of people. I spend a lot of my time, I take the train into work every day, and I spend that whole time, listening to music and thinking about a cottage in the middle of nowhere. where I don't have to look at any of these people.
Right. And in some parallel universe, there's Jeremiah in that cottage thinking, man, I am so bored right now. I can kill myself.
This is bullshit.
Who thought this is a good idea?
Nobody cares about my pine cone art.
Yeah, it turns out pine cone art's not quite the biggest seller you thought it would be.
You can cover it in peanut butter, and that's about it. I think that.
I mean, the medium is just there's so much of the medium around. I feel like the pine cone art market has got to be like just way oversaturated in rural areas specifically. But
doesn't that feel like just the idea? I don't know what pinecone art is. I've never, I don't think I've ever seen it, but it does feel like one of those things, like when you go into like a tourist town in like Tennessee or something, that like some, I don't know, like that touristy mom and pop shop, like the people who moved there from like Hoboken, New Jersey, like 3 years prior, and they're like in their 60s, they opened up like a little shop. I feel like that's some bullshit they would sell.
Yeah, it's their vision of retirement. It's like all the local artisans, and it's either pinecone art or it's like weird etched in wood somehow.
It's always wood burning.
Like a soldering iron. Yeah. So a lot of wood burning.
It's just so much wood burning.
It's like they have all these soldering irons, but they don't know what to do with them. You can't make electronics. But anywho, you can expect, whoever's listening, you can expect a lot of these side tangents, as me and Jeremiah have a penchant for being, well, borderline impossible to talk to. So,
well, that's our entire relationship. I think it's been 20 plus years of just this.
Yeah. Yep, it's madness to some, but to us, it's home.
It's shared. It's two people that share the same interest with zero affinity for allowing other people to understand those things. I suppose, like
that's true. We're really giving people a peek behind the curtain, of our little.
And what I hope is that, and hopefully somebody that's listening to this is somebody who are some people that we've interacted with, out in the world, and they can't possibly be that way. We are. Right. We are. No, it's just as dumb as you thought we were.
Yeah. Any eye rolls out there? I mean, I get it. I get it. So
let's get into it. I'm excited.
You commute to the train, and you arrive there though to the train by bicycle. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I wish I could say I was diligent about doing that every day, but some mornings I'm sleeping in a little bit longer. So because the commute is here's what drives me a little bit bonkers, but it's the learning curve of living in LA. And for context, I've only lived in LA for maybe like 7 months at this point, definitely less than a year. So I'm still getting used to everything, and part of that is getting to work. As somebody who doesn't have a vehicle, when I haven't been traveling for work, like, planes and buses and all that stuff, I've been riding my bike everywhere. And here, to go 10 miles takes it will never be less than an hour. And that's by like car, right? Yeah. So I get on the train, I ride like 2 miles on my bike to the train, take the bike on the train, and then I've got like another 2 mile ride after I get off. And that's just to go like 11 miles or something. And it's like an hour and 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. So you're about the same time as a car. You can make the same time as any standard vehicle. And
I actually think I have a pretty good track record. I was keeping track there for a while just for my own edification, I suppose. But I think more times than not, I'm faster than a car. It's especially coming home. That's where I really notice it, because it's rush hour and people are jammed up, and it takes that much longer just to get 10 miles. So, the train is pretty reliably right around that like 35-minute mark, which is why I rely on it. And I don't just ride there and back, I don't think 10 miles is not difficult, especially here, because it's not like, the route is not crazy hilly or anything like that. But yeah, the train is definitely a little bit faster for that. So I'll take that. Any day.
And to add some even more context to this, LA is the most dangerous city to ride the bike.
And boy, can I attest to that. There have been times where I've chosen not to ride based on that. And this is the first place that's been true. But yeah, I'm anxious for you to come out here and to ride around and just sort of get a feel for it, because it is very different. I mean, at first it feels, you remember when I moved to Nashville and I was telling you that people were telling me it's not a very bike friendly place. And you responded with, you can bike anywhere. Like, it's going to be about the same. Right.
Yeah.
And that was true. That's was totally true. Nashville was not nearly as, incredibly easy. It's basically Orlando, right? With more hills. But here is like, I actually fought against that feeling of like, it kept creeping in my head like, oh, this is a dangerous place to ride. And I actually fought that back a couple of times. I was like, no, you're just getting used to it. You're just getting used to it. And I don't think I can ignore it anymore. It really is the most dangerous place I've ever ridden.
Man. Yeah, I really can't wait to experience that as well because, in Orlando, it's a totally different ball game. I mean, you are sometimes squeezed between lanes or you feel, I mean, I know you've experienced this all the time where you can feel the wind from the car coming up on your left if you're, going with traffic, for example. Sometimes you'll feel it really close. But other than that, and it doesn't, honestly, for me, it doesn't happen that often. Outside of that, there's no mortal danger. There's no, as long as you're paying attention to some reasonable degree, you can get along okay. But it sounds like, it's just freaking Mad Max out there. It's just things are just fair. Kind of compiled and just shoved together. And I often make the joke, which wasn't my joke, but I'd like to take credit for it. Somebody told me that LA is basically like 10 Orlandos shoved together. And if that's the case, you're basically just saying, hey, here's some urban sprawl, but we're going to just, smush it like a piece of paper.
Yeah. That's actually on that note. It's interesting you bring that up because think about like riding in Hillsdale, right? Like back home where we're from, and it's not unsafe to ride there. But people aren't used to seeing people commute by bike there. So I guess my point isn't that it's dangerous, but there is a certain level of danger, right? Anytime you're riding on roads, especially when drivers aren't used to looking out for cars or cyclists. And then add to that the fact that people in Hillsdale, a lot of times will go out of their way to not get over, right? They love that little game of like, let's force them to ride into those potholes on the side of this road that we'll never fix. Let's
really make them suck in that diesel fume.
Right, exactly.
We really want them to smell it.
Right. I want them to see the glint off the silver balls that hang from my rear hitch.
Exactly. I wanted to blind them.
So think about that, and then think about the difference between Hillsdale and Orlando. And I think one of the most apt ways that I know how to describe that is kind of what you said, like where I remember because Orlando was the first place I started riding seriously, and I learned very quickly what it's like to have a sort of like a melting pot of drivers. Right. Because Florida, especially like Orlando, like tons of people, whether they're tourists or they're like snowbirds or they're from Puerto Rico or, you have all these different like cultures and driving styles are coming together and they're trying to function in the same place. And it's it's a bit of a madhouse. Right. And so going back to what you said about LA being like 10 Orlandos, it is that way on that front as well, where it's like, it's just the same issues you deal with in Orlando, you deal with here, but it's like amped up by like 10. There's been times where I've been at fault, like that thing where you're like, I feel like a jerk. I shouldn't have done that, right? Like, I should have just stopped. Times. I didn't have to go, right? Like, I'm not in that big of a hurry, right? More times than not here in LA, I've learned that like there's some really good like downhills and stuff on my route to work, and I just can't take advantage of them. It's just not worth it. Like there's been multiple times it's been entirely, totally safe looking, no cars behind me, no cars in front of me. And then like all of a sudden I'll like lean into this downhill and like really enjoy it. And a Jeep will just come out of nowhere, right? Like from some side alley or something like that. And they don't stop, they just jet right on into the road. So there's so many instances of that level of, I guess, drivers not taking care, right? And it's not just about drivers to cyclists. It's just drivers in general. Like they're more times than not, they're thinking about what they want and where they're going. And that's the end all be all. And so be it if it's a cyclist or a Toyota Corolla, they're going to go right through them.
Yeah. That level of selfishness is kind of, it seems like that's also ramped up. Because here in Orlando, there's definitely some of that. But I would say, like you were mentioning earlier, there are some times where you want to be a cowboy, you screw up and cars honk at you and you're like, well, yeah, that was kind of my fault. and to me, most of the hazards I've had here are a result of that, like kind of my own, okay, I thought I could run and gun this 4-way, but this person was clearly going to go first, or, whatever. Like there's so many every day too situations where you're very, at least for me, and I don't know how you feel about it in LA, but I can definitely play fast and loose with the traffic laws, which I know that's a big bone of contention to people who want, to basically crack down on bicyclists and everything.
And other cyclists too, right? Like, there are other and I use the term cyclist very deliberately. It's it's usually the lycra clad, full carbon bikers, and God bless them. If I could have their kit, I would. But it's usually those people that are very you're almost looked down upon for not being able to do a track stand at a stoplight. You know what I mean? And they're very abide by the rules 100%, very black and white. Because if you don't, you're setting a bad example and you're shaming cyclists everywhere, which is not that unfair of a point. But at the same point, it's I just don't see it that way. I'm trying to get somewhere. And part of the joy of being on a bike is being able to sort of be a little bit flexible and fast and loose in wherever you can, but it does have to be within reason, I think.
Right. Yeah. And, it's funny you mentioned the lycra clad people. And I always joke that, never call me a bicyclist. I'm a guy on a bike, and there's a big difference. And to me, that line is some of the spandex wearing carbon fiber, 50-year-old guys who are hedge fund managers, and they're like, I could easily spend $4,000 on this bike, and it's something fun to do over the weekend. They're usually doing this stuff as fitness. It's hard pressed to find somebody who's bike commuting in that sort of regalia and with that mindset.
Yeah, no, very, very true. And I've kind of come around on this topic a little bit. I used to be, I don't know if it was ever jealousy per se. It could easily have been jealousy, but I think that, I would take it in a heartbeat. I would take the lycra and the full carbon road bike with Di2 and the most expensive, the Ultegra group set, and I'd take it all. I'd in a heartbeat, and I would turn into one of those guys immediately. However, at the same point, I think that's more of that's where I've bent on that line of thinking. Where I have not bent is I've never seen myself as a cyclist either. We don't really, I think I can take liberty and speak for both of us when I say that, I don't think that we are really, this has never been sport, it was born out of necessity, and then it just sort of developed into a passion and kind of just a hard appreciation for the bicycle as a machine and what it allows us to do on basically no budget. And now that I have, I can afford my own place in Los Angeles, albeit very small. I finally bought, a bike that I had been drooling over for, 3 years. And I still think about my old bike, my $500 Trek that I bought it in College Park with the same amount of affection that I do my new bike. So I don't know. I would take the full carbon bike and I would I'll take all the gear you want to give me, Yeah. But,
and the key is that somebody's giving it, right? Because you can't really afford to be that guy who would have, a set of those types of bikes.
And that's kind of the rub, right? I'm not going to pour, because this is born out of necessity. And yes, it's a passion now, but everything does come back to I guess the utility of it. So the idea of spending, $4,000 on a bike and $2,000 on gear, it doesn't make any sense to me. Albeit, people who can do that, I'm not hating on you. Go for it. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. It might make more sense if you're making 100K a year versus, half or less than half of that. I think that's why I kind of die on that hill as far as the bicyclist and a guy who rides a bike distinction. Because there is a certain snobbery to this thing. And for me, I'm always pushing more to the community side, the side that says everybody should ride a bike if they can. But then there's another part of me, that identity split like I just mentioned about the law stuff, where I enjoy the looseness of the law and the kind of, I don't even know how you'd say it, just the laxness about bicycles in general, because we are very much the exception to the rule as opposed to the rule, at least here in the States. Europe's a whole different shebang. I remember in 2014, I visited one of our mutual friends in Germany, and I went to Berlin, and it blew my mind to see somebody just to see basically a whole city operating with bikes, and to just be kind of on my left and right have bikers, and these are people in suits and dresses and stuff, and kind of the middle of winter. I was just like, man, I don't know how I would function here. I mean, I guess, I hope fine. I'd be more normalized. But here it does seem like it's special in a way, I guess. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I suppose that you could also look at that two different ways, right? I mean, it is special, and we do have a lot of flexibility here. I know, like, as a quick example, like when I was looking into the local laws here about, just cycling and in general and using like roads and all that stuff. And the sidewalk rule is pretty much non-existent here. Mm-hmm. There's no actual law in the books anywhere that I've been able to turn up that says anything about not being able to ride your bike on the sidewalk, right? Whereas in Nashville and in Orlando, I think, if I remember correctly, it was like, you can't do that unless it is the safest option, right? Which is still vague. Right. It's like, you could always just say, well, I felt it was the safest option, but it does address it. And in LA, it doesn't. It's just kind of frowned upon. And that kind of brings maybe another facet to this, is like, I don't really care. Like, that's the other joy of that type of flexibility, is like, I'm going to ride where I do feel safest. And in LA, 9 times out of 10, it's not on the road, which maybe not 9 times out of 10, but it really half the time I'm in. I guess maybe it's also because I have I'm riding a mountain bike for city commuting, which is also a little bit bizarre, but it is helpful, like being able to jump off curbs and not out into traffic usually, but just being able to like get around in obstacles and to make those split-second decisions. I know, like on our bike, like you and I had the same bike for a very long time, and on our bikes, I rode my bike very hard, and I went through spokes like nobody's business.
Yeah, you're more of a curb jumper, I remember.
Yeah. I the heart of a mountain biker. Like I don't want to stay on flat road if I can help it, but.
And I'm more like, ouch, there's so many bumps.
Ouchie.
Because I work at a place where there's cobblestone around, and I hate it so much.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, at first I thought it was bizarre that you would choose to use that as your commuter, a mountain bike. But I mean, the more I think about it, the more you describe your situation, it seems perfect. Like you have.
Yeah, it is. And it really is. I will be the first to admit right up front that was a happy accident, because I bought this bike because I finally had them. I saved, forever for this bike. And I finally had the ability, I had saved for a thing and I had the money, but then I also had a job that pays a decent salary. So like, I didn't have to make that choice of like, I can have the thing I want or I can eat, So I finally got this thing that I wanted. And it just happens to be that it's in LA, and it happens to be a very utilitarian way for me to bike around. That being said, it's incredibly inefficient. It takes, it's like double the effort everywhere I go.
Yeah, but that's true. But I also wonder if you had a car, if you would feel the same way about parking garages and finding parking. And
I would take this 100 times over. I've went down that road. I've got friends here that drive, and I've obviously ridden in cars with them, and I've taken a lot of Ubers and Lyfts and all that stuff, and just having to be in the driver's. I mean, being a passenger alone, I get annoyed at the traffic and the parking or lack thereof. The lack of parking here. So the idea of like having to pay insurance, make a car payment, and get my car tested every year, and try to find parking, and then like. Also, something here in LA is parking tickets are rampant. It's basically highway robbery. I think it's something like, I'm sure somebody could correct me on this, but definitely not less than $80. And I think it can be north of like 120 per parking ticket.
Jeez.
Yeah. And then there's people who live in apartment buildings, like there's parking available, but you have to pay monthly for it. And it's always $200 or $300 a month just for a parking space. So it just doesn't make sense to drive here.
Yeah, that's crazy. I forgot about all those inner city costs,
Yeah, they nickel and dime.
I was trying to think of when we first kind of got on the whole bike thing in general. And I know both of us started here in Orlando, more or less. And I think for me, I started like most people do, I think, with a Walmart bike. I tried to buy the best Walmart bike money could buy, which is, maybe $300 or something. And I believe at some point that was stolen. And then I, for whatever reason, I decided to up my game because at that point I was riding fairly regularly as kind of just a leisurely thing. I don't think I was thinking much of it. And then I went to Dave's World Cycle here in Orlando, and there's several locations. And they were great. And I got my first Trek, and shortly after I had a 99 Cavalier, and the brakes went out on it. And it was going to cost like a ton to fix. And at the time I didn't have the money. And at that point, I was already starting to commute to work anyway via bicycle. It was only about 5 miles. I just decided, well, maybe I don't buy a car right away. And then months turned into a year, and a year turned into several years, and I'm still without a car. And it's just been an interesting journey. And I'm trying to remember how I got you hooked on it.
It's really cool to rehash that because I see it. So there's this vision in my head that it'll forever be burned in my memory. It's at 3020, and it's your Cavalier is sitting in the driveway, right? And I don't think that there was I think it was on all 4 wheels were on it. But it was like before we changed the brakes. It was like that when you were changing the brake rotors yourself, or attempting to. But I remember that day you came, I believe you were coming home from Rollins or whatever, but that road that we were on, Fairway, like seeing you on your bike. And I was like, God, that's like he's been riding his bike to work all the time. I just thought you were the craziest person. I was like, are you insane? 5 miles? You got to be out of your mind, kid.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's the reaction. I still get a lot, and I'm sure you've gotten it, no shortage of that reaction. If people just can't comprehend because they've always had cars and it's just normal. It's a normal way of life. Like I was saying earlier, we're the exception and not the rule. I remember one time too that I can't remember. We were going to go somewhere, maybe it was a movie theater or something, and I beat you there, and you were very surprised that I beat you there. I think that helps.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't doubt that that's happened numerous times.
Yeah, it's like, how dare you beat my Impala, my 2001 Impala V6, man.
It is tan brown. It is the fastest color. No, and actually, that is why that Impala. I never took care of my cars. I was so irresponsible with my cars, and when that car decided to go, I couldn't afford another one. I was working. I was at Full Sail at the time, wasn't I? I was like in my first year of working at Full Sail, and I think my ride was like, it couldn't have been 5 miles, could it? Yeah,
I think from where we were to Full Sail, I think it was around 5-ish. Yeah. Well, and plus it was on a kind of a harder road.
And I didn't actually, if you recall, I didn't actually start riding. I don't think I started riding until 690.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I was like riding a bike regularly at 3020.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is true.
I think I got it when I was at 3020, but I think I was still like my car was still running. But in any case, it was, you were definitely the catalyst for it. I think it was like the proof was in the pudding, right? It was like you had been doing it for like between 1 and 2 years at that point. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I guess I could do that. And with a lot of encouragement from you as well, I remember going down to David's in College Park and getting that old sweet Trek.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
God bless her. I don't remember. Backing up for a second. I didn't remember you having a Walmart bike.
Yeah, I did very briefly. Because I think I really wish I could remember the reason why I even started. I don't know if it was fitness or maybe just a way to cool down or something after like a workout. I can't remember exactly, but I just knew that, because I had always ridden a bike as a kid. And actually my whole beginning of riding a bike is a little interesting because basically it involves my neighbor, back in where we grew up. It was very common just to have a bunch of neighbor kids around and you could go play with them and dink around until basically the lights would come on, the street lights would come on. And I remember my dad was mad at me because I couldn't ride my bike with my other friends. Like my other friends had just started learning how to ride a bike and I couldn't really get it and I didn't really want to. And he basically, I laugh now, but I'm weirdly grateful that he basically whipped me and told me to get outside and learn how to ride the bike. Cause otherwise you're not going to be able to hang out with your friends. And maybe he was worried I was going to be a social outcast. Maybe he was just worried that I was going to stay inside and interrupt him from watching TV.
Right.
But, which is probably the closer to the truth. But either way, I can vividly remember riding downhill and getting it. Everybody has that moment when they first some equilibrium inside them checks in, and they're riding a bike. But I had a paper route and I had a bike then and stuff like that. So when I think back on it, I guess it's in the DNA there. But of course, after you're a teenager, or it's just looked down upon because you want to get your car and all that other crap. So.
It is weird, right? How it takes that, like in our culture, like Western culture, it does take that turn where suddenly when you say riding a bike and look no further than our collective dating history, right? Like,
yeah,
the idea when you say,
what history?
When you say I ride a bicycle, you get these looks that are like, okay, well, are you, do you have a DUI? Are you poor? Why do you ride a bike? It is this like weird, it's almost like a dirty thing to do.
Definitely. Yeah. It's just, I've talked to people online who would instantly block me or not talk to me after I told them, well, I might be a little late because I'm on the bicycle and it's supposed to rain this day or whatever.
Also, I might be very sweaty.
Right, yeah. And this just, yeah, exactly.
10 minutes while I go into the movie theater bathroom and change clothes.
The sweat fact, let me tell you, we've done nothing so far but talk about pros. We got to get into the cons, man, because sweat is real and weather is real.
Motivation is like, I fight it constantly. I'll say, one thing that does me, I'm going to frame it like it's a disservice, but in reality, it's the most amazing thing. And it's rideshares, like Lyft and Uber and all that. When it comes to the impact it has on me riding, I can get up in the morning and be like, okay, I'm feeling, okay, yeah, I'll ride my bike, right? I'll do the bike to train to bike to work. I'll do that. But then there's plenty of other days where I get up and I'm like, okay, all right, I'll get the helmet and I'll put my gloves on and I think I'll just call a car.
Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah. Maybe I drink a little too much last hour. I stayed up a little too late or something that, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's always there. And it's a little bit like wanting to get in shape and keeping a box of donuts on the counter. It's just this thing you always have, right? And it's right in my pocket, and I can easily bail on riding anytime I want. But yeah, no, there's some crazy. So have you been dealing with it out here in LA? I'll say the heat is one thing, right? Like that's a beast in and of itself. What do you deal with in Florida? It's been so long since I've ridden there. Obviously, I remember the springtime rains every day at 3:32 p.m. I remember those, right?
Yeah.
But what's it what's it like right now, like in a summertime in Florida? I mean, it's got to just be like riding in quicksand, right? I mean, just how muggy it is.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Usually, I don't know if it's climate change or whatever, but from what I understand, and I sort of remember this when I first moved here, but maybe it was just my imagination. Summertime can have like consistent rain. There'll be like at noon or maybe a little later in the day, it'll rain predictably more or less every day. Seems like lately, though, the rain is kind of hit and miss, and sometimes you'll get days where it'll rain more or less the whole day. And to me, that's the most annoying thing. If you have to go somewhere and there's no other way to get there, but by bike, you have to just go in the rain and deal with it. That's kind of the biggest hurdle. And of course, it's immediately hot. So you have this blanket of humidity that just, it's relentless.
Can I tell you what the worst part of that for me is? The idea, like before I go out into a rainy ride, is wet feet.
Ooh,
the idea that my feet will be wet when I get to the grocery store or wherever I have to go, that sometimes is enough to make me like just rage quit. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to be hungry.
Yeah, because shoes and socks, the thing is, too, the best way to clean those is to get them out in the sun. And sometimes, if you forget to do that, the next day or whatever, or, it's the morning time and, oh, shit, I got to go to work. And you got to put the nasty wet shoes and socks. I'm just speaking from experience here on because, what other choice do you have? Because you only have the one pair or whatever, or it's your favorite pair or whatever.
Yeah. And, this brings up an interesting topic. And it's something I struggle with because as I have a very tiny scrap of money now, right? I have a little bit of expendable income. So I think about like, what should I get for my bike or my like riding gear, right? I don't know how I feel about getting, so like I look at, okay, I don't want my feet to be wet, right? Well, there's like booties and there's all kinds of specialty riding gear that you can get. There is this weird part of me that even though it serves it fills a void, right? It serves a purpose. And there's no reason that I should feel this way. There is this little part of me that sort of feels like, it's bullshit, right? Like where I'm just like, really, I'm going to like go spend $40 on a pair of booties that I'll wear every now and then. I mean, I have no way to rationalize this to you, but I just have that little bit of, and I think that's maybe, we all have a little hipster in us. And I think maybe that's the thing, right? Like that's my little, I don't know if it's ego or what it is, but there's that feeling where I'm like, I don't want to spend and own hundreds of dollars worth of kit and then have to have a section in my closet where I have like certain jerseys or various pieces of gear that I have. Like, I just want to put on my helmet. I want to put on my gloves. I want to put on my riding shoes, which is a new thing, by the way. That's the piece that I did bend on. And I just want to go. I want to be in shorts. I don't care what I'm wearing. I don't know. I feel like if I go down that road, like if I open Pandora's box, it's just going to be a thing I pour money into. And then I guess maybe the fear is like it'll lose that charm. That idea of just like grabbing the bike and going scrapping it out somewhere. And I think it's totally silly. I'll be the first to say it's absolutely ridiculous to feel that way, but.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. Bicycling community, it's not immune to, all the gear and all this accoutrement that goes with it. There's hundreds of channels dedicated to that stuff, and just information and all this stuff to just try to sell you an enhancement to your experience when the core experience of riding a bike is, like you said, just getting on and going. To me, that's the whole beauty of the thing. Just that mobility is amazing. And and if you buy all this other gear, you're constantly thinking, well, was this worth it? And feeling yourself and having these battles, and basically they're just battles of, should I get this other higher tier thing or this other brand? And it's just like, man, you could really get caught up in that minutia.
No, for sure. And okay, so maybe to highlight the other side to that argument is like one thing that you and I have both, I guess, bent on is padded shorts, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh my good Lord. Like
I've been very hard on that.
No, I won't throw them. Like if I'm just getting on my bike, even my mountain bike, and I'm just going to go, ride a few miles or something and just tear about just because I've got energy or I'm just going to get a couple errands done or something, I'm not going to throw them on. But when I ride to work, when I'm sustained, when I'm in the saddle, right, and I'm sustained in there, then I want them on. Like they're amazing. And it is the same way with like rain booties or, high grade socks, and all kinds of things. Sunglasses are like a huge, huge thing where I'm just like, just $10, bullshit sunglasses are fine. Like I don't.
Yeah.
So I'll just say that, like, yeah, there are things that I've been. I think this is just more of a personal, like, it's maybe more of a commentary on how we view, like, maybe the why. Like, why do we ride? Which is important. Like, and if you want to have tons of gear, and you want to have gear for every weather set, and you want to always be protected, and you want the highest grade whatever, then that's great. Like, if you're out there smashing distances and trying to set PRs constantly, then you're a badass, and you're more badass than I am.
Yeah. And some of it, I wonder, is the community around it, because it's at least in my experience, I haven't found individuals necessarily who are like that, but you'll get groups of, these quote bicyclists who, have the Lycra and are talking about the different gear sets they have and the different equipment they have and what they feel it does to them and all this stuff, tip-tapping off their anecdotal experiences.
Which is fine. And okay, there's, so, sorry, I had to clear my throat. So when I'm in Miami, so I go to Miami for a few months out of the year to run a show. I manage a live event that happens down in Coral Gables. And when I'm down there, I go to a coffee shop every morning. And at this coffee shop, it's kind of like in a rich part of neighborhood. So it's a lot of like retirees. And they are all like, I'll go in and there's never any less than 5 mid to high end bikes. I'm talking like it's not uncommon to see multiple like Ultegra and like 105 group sets and, the most aero looking frames you could imagine. I mean, just people just spending retirement money on really high end stuff, and they're casual riders. I've had a few chats with them and like with several of them, and all my experiences have been very positive. They've been, they just talk about how they all get together as a group and they go out and they ride and, they'll do maybe 30 miles and we'll do it like 3-4 days a week. And all of that's totally fine. And then you'll get the one apple like that I'll try to talk to them about it. Oh, I love your bike, man. That's a fantastic saddle. Like what? Oh, like, just try, how you try to like, just get some bicycle chat going. Right.
Yeah.
And it's any excuse to try to touch their bike, really.
Right.
I could never have
literally
this.
Kick their tires, and they're like, "What are you kicking my tires for?"
Please don't do that. Those cost way more than your car.
Right.
And it'll be somebody that talks about how they do it for the environment, or what do you ride? And then I'll be like, oh yeah, I ride a Santa Cruz Chameleon. And they're like, oh, I've never heard of that. Oh yeah, it's a mountain bike. It's a, it's a great bike, like, and I maybe talk a little bit like, oh, one of those. Right. Yeah. That's the mentality that just drives me up the fucking wall, is this idea that like you should be measured by your gear or your ability or how often you ride, or that just drives me nuts. And that is the most rampant shit in all of the, a large majority of bike shops that I go into, especially out here, and just the community at large, in several places I've lived anyway. That's my bugaboo. The environment thing too. I've always found that a little bit silly. If that's your reason for cycling, God bless. Keep on cycling. But for me, it's just never hit close to home. I'm all for saving the environment, but I don't think riding a bike is going to do it.
No, yeah, for sure. Right. I mean, the environment angle is fine, but it's really, for me at least, more of a bonus. It's really first and foremost about the feeling and really the cash savings, honestly. But I kind of just balance between those two things. It's usually more the feeling most of the time, except, when my bike's doing something wonky and I have to fix it and I know I have to fix it.
You don't have a choice. It's like, you can't just like keep riding when your wheel is like, it's not true.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to stop and fix it then.
I'll put that too in the pro column. When it comes to fixing your, the DIY person, definitely bikes are amazing for that reason.
What you can get away with bare minimum tools, and you do have to have some bike specific tools, right? But if you just had like a good bicycle multi-tool and that's all you carried, you can literally fix 90% of the issues you'll ever come across.
Yeah,
you have a multi-tool, a bicycle multi-tool and a patch kit, a spare tube, and like that's amazing.
Yeah, and it is crazy. Like, because at first, probably for the first few years I had my bike, I was afraid to work on it. I didn't really actually, and I think this is true of most people, know how bikes actually work. What is a cassette or a freewheel, and what are the gearing? How does the gearing actually work, and the derailleur work?
That was my big one. That was like, I mean, I didn't know any of it, but that was the biggest eye opener. Was like, I've learned more about the relationship, like how actual cogs and gears work. And how they, integrate with each other. Like if you're on the smallest size one, doesn't mean that's it's like counterintuitive, right? Yeah. Surprisingly simple machines, but there is a learning curve to it. But it's a really easy cipher to crack. Like once you crack it, you can work on it all day long. And not only that, you can get away with, sometimes you can fix it with parts that you find on the side of the road. Or on the trails or whatever. I mean, I think I sent you a picture when my rear derailleur just exploded, out of for no reason. Like I think the screw just worked itself loose.
Which is still amazing. I've never seen one explode.
I know, and I just took a screw from my bottle cage and fixed one of the rear cogs. And I actually rode on it that way for quite a while afterwards. I mean, it's that kind of flexibility that it's hard to, once you have the knowledge and you have the bare tools, it's hard to not know how to fix it. Whereas with a car, I'm just reliant on whatever garage can squeeze me in before I got to go to work the next day.
Yeah. And you're worrying about if they're going to screw you over and stuff like that. And that, I don't know. I personally have never heard any local bike shops screw anybody over. I'm sure it's happened. I'm sure it happens sometimes, but it's such a different market and a different mindset that I would attribute it more to incompetence versus somebody maliciously saying, oh, you need this, this, and this. So you need to pay this, this, and this. Just preying on ignorance. But I mean, I'm sure it happens in any field. But as far as the ingenuity and the spirit of DIY when it comes to bikes, I think look no further than your average homeless person. You're going to see some of the most insane and creative fixes for bikes on somebody who commutes and is homeless.
You are not joking. I take picture. I keep my camera on my phone ready to go when I'm on the train. I mean, some of the hacks and bodges that I've seen from homeless people on their bikes is just the ad for Bombas socks.
Yeah, I think so.
Have you heard that from podcasts and stuff? So apparently they give out I think that this is true, but if you buy a pair, they donate a pair, right? Now I don't know the logistics of how that happens. If it's probably at the end of the year they sold X amount, so they'll donate X amount, or where they go, I don't know. But I saw a homeless man who had just the frame of a saddle and he put a Bombas sock around it, and it was like stuffed with whatever was in there. And that was his padded saddle was a Bombas sock.
Nice. Smart man.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Because I mean, especially if you're riding that bike all day, if you're a homeless person, it's just, you need that padding. Like it's your home, essentially. It's your.
So I have a question for you. You have been commuting by bike for many years now, and you've been on basically the same bike. I mean, I think you've had two, but basically the same model, hybrid road bike, and you've been acquiring all this knowledge of, like working at your college's bike shop, kind of running in on a volunteer basis and all this other stuff, maintaining the fleet of various commuter bikes on campus. Do you see, or do you have any aspirations for maybe leaning into bicycles more as a potential, either it could be a career path. I don't know if it would be a career path, or basically, do you see them playing a larger role than they already do? Or do you think that you've found the fit? You've found where bicycles live?
Oh man, that's a great question. I want to say if I had the opportunity and the chance to make them a larger part of my life, I would. But I'm not 100% sure how that would look logistically. So and I'm always going on about my pie in the sky, but basically I would love to have a community oriented bike shop. If I ever went further down the bike rabbit hole, I would really like to do something like that, because some of my training as a counselor is giving me a lot of insight into advocacy and just nonprofits in general and how these things all kind of work together. So if I could somehow tie that into a community bike shop where there is emphasis on the community coming together and, repairing, renting, you name it, and just different activities, to me, that would be the thing I would like to get my hands in the most. However, that being said, the business side of things, logistics of where do I put it? Where is the community going to be served the most? That would be, I think, to me, the hardest part, at least initially, of course. I'm sure it's obviously no cakewalk running the thing. I do a lot of work at the center here in Orlando. It's a nonprofit that does HIV and hepatitis C, and the Orlando Health Department also does different testing. But basically, it is essentially the space where people from the community, from the LGBTQ plus community, can come in and kind of make it their own. And, it doesn't even necessarily have to be specifically for them, but it's kind of this neutral community space, and people will come in and rent certain rooms and things like that for events. There'll be all kinds of fundraisers. So I would love to have that kind of model, basically, and put it, but on a bike shop. But again, logistically, that's going to be kind of the tough part. Yeah, but aside from that, I mean, barring that, I guess I don't feel like I'm ever going to not be some kind of bike person. Even I can imagine a future where I have a car, maybe I'm older, or I live in some very remote place. I still want to have some kind of connection with a bicycle, however that looks. That's kind of the long version of your answer. Sorry.
No, that's exactly what I was getting at. Like I saw, so 2 years ago, I saw the Detroit Red Wings, of which I'm a monstrous fan. They do a thing every year. It's effectively just amazing PR. But they do this community outreach thing where they bring in a bunch of kids. They build a bunch of kids bikes, like Walmart level kids bikes, and they build like a bunch of blue ones and a bunch of pink ones, and like boys and girls bikes, and they bus in, I don't know what it is, like 1, 2, 3 buses, bunch of kids basically from like an entire school or like a school district or something. These kids go through like a kind of a training, about like bike safety and like what you should and should not do. They get t-shirts and all that stuff. And then at the end, they have the big reveal where they take them out in the parking lot, and they've just got all the like hundreds of bikes just lined up, and all the kids get a bike, right? And it's really cool. It's a cool, like, feel good type of story. My first feeling was like, God, it would have been so awesome if they would have been teaching those kids how to build those bikes.
Yeah.
Like, like, hey, let's build a bike with a, somebody who's, like you have maybe, I don't know if it's like one person for every 5 kids or something, or one per, if it's one-on-one, like, I don't know what it is, but like maybe the age group has to be a little bit older. I don't know. But to sit there and like have a program where, you teach people how to be self-sufficient, which yes, it's only on a bike, but that is like, to me, if that were the angle that we took with a lot of things, then we might be better off. And I think specifically with bicycles, it takes some of the, I know when I was a kid, if somebody would have showed me how a bike works and why it's fascinating, then maybe I wouldn't have gravitated towards it. Maybe I would have just found bikes to be like just this thing in the garage. But there's an equal possibility that I would have found them incredibly fascinating, and I would have started riding sooner and having a better appreciation for them earlier on in my life. And I don't know. I had always thought like so I was thinking about that. And that's why I asked you that question, because I was like, I feel like bikes could be a vessel for something bigger. I don't know, something better, or not better, but like maybe a better use of our time, or more impactful, or you know what I mean? Like, it's not just about us being utilitarian. I think we're gathering, especially over the next handful of years, we'll be gathering enough knowledge that we could certainly, other people could benefit from it, and helping them get around the learning curve a little bit quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can definitely imagine, in my scenario, I would love to see very few staff, but mostly a volunteer run organization who, would focus on giving people who either don't have a bike or have interest in bikes just the knowledge and the tools that they would need to kind of get that experience. And I can definitely see, it's interesting. You mentioned the college I work for. I help with the bike program, and we're under the banner of sustainability. That's kind of how the bike program runs. It's, anybody who's working in the environmental sciences, or, who's majoring in the environmental sciences, can work at the bike shop and check bikes and things like that. And to me, sustainability doesn't just mean the bike itself. It can't just mean that we're riding bikes and, we're carbon neutral or whatever flashy environmental term you want to use. To me, it comes in the skill, right? So in the skill to repair your bike or just know what it's about. Because I think that overlaps when you're talking about other community aspects, when you're talking about agriculture, farming and the things they're doing with that, with like, there's certain, like here in Orlando, we have what's called fleet farming, and they'll go around and basically plant these little micro farms in people's front yards with their permission, which is amazing. But how much more impactful that would be if the people who were volunteering that space would actually be more a part of it. And then maybe you have another element of the community. Well, that's great. We can grow the food, but how do we cook it? How do we get the most out of it? So there's more of these kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, home economics aspect to it. Like, so when I say community, I would love to see it. I envision it, pie in the sky would be that it's one part of an integral network of different, whether they be nonprofit or not, but different places that it would be community oriented and kind of act as a third space, so to speak, where people can come and learn and feel free to do so and not feel completely pressured to buy stuff, and quite the opposite, feel so good about their experience that they would want to share it and keep the cycle going.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it might sound, I guess, like when we get off on these tangents like this, it gets to be a little bit, or maybe it could feel to an outsider like it's a bit maybe, for lack of a better term, over dramatic, or maybe we're placing too much importance on bicycling or whatever. But I'll be honest, it certainly changed my life, and it's made perhaps in a way that's not as well recognized, that ties directly into what you're talking about, is the confidence boost that I get from. It's a thing I'm constantly learning on, and that's never done. It is working on a bike, riding a bike, getting your fitness level to a point where, like, you start out and you're like, okay, I can ride a mile or two, and then you have this like 2 mile radius, and then you slowly you start seeing like, oh, now I've got a 5-mile radius. Oh, now I can go anywhere in a 10-mile radius. And then suddenly it's like a 25-mile ride might exhaust you, but you got it. And then you can still go do stuff afterwards. And it taught me patience. And as somebody who struggles with a lot of anxiety at times, it has been an outlet when I'm feeling like, my nerves are kind of going crazy and stuff. And it's an exercise. So it's giving me the endorphins, but it's also taking me someplace and it's letting me see things a little bit differently. And I think that was the first thing that I noticed was riding around the neighborhood that I lived in for a couple of years. It looked different. I don't know how to explain that, but it looked completely different. All these roads that I had driven down many times, you just kind of don't notice the details. So just, teaching you to be slower and more patient. And I don't know, there is something, maybe that's less inherent to bicycles and just more inherent to moving slower, One of the, and not to get too long-winded into this, but one of the side effects of being a guy who rides a bicycle is you are also a guy who walks a lot, Yeah. I don't ride 100% of the places I go. A lot of the times I'm walking, and my walking radius is at, like 8 miles or 5 miles, somewhere in that range, depending on where I'm at or the weather. And you see things differently when you're walking as opposed to riding a bike. And seeing that magic, it was like a little peek behind the curtain, if you will. That to me is a magical thing. That's what changed, or maybe gives me this little tiny spark of positivity kind of when I need it most. And perhaps that's a little like hyper specific to myself, but I think that is true in some sense for anybody, right? Like moving slower, it does, it impacts you positively. So I think that the more that we can maybe impart that, or maybe even just impress upon people the importance of that every now and then, is important. And if you do that through community programs that are centered around cycling or walking or whatever it is, by all means. If you just do it by virtue of being a person who rides or walks or does whatever you do, and you just influence people in your everyday life, I mean, it's all the same, right? And it's all good. I don't think that you can lose if that's your mindset.
Speaking about the community programs, I think there isn't one, well, I should say there isn't one that is very effective, that at the core of it isn't somebody or a group of somebody's trying to share the magic that was given to them by the thing that they're advocating for. Like for us, of course, it's bikes, and I completely agree with a lot of what you're saying, especially about the small, or the place we grew up, riding around there now. It just blows my mind how different I see the whole thing. And how
is it not one of your most favorite things when you go back home? It's incredible.
It's so nuts. I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds of times I can think about riding down US 12, but I'm on a bicycle and it feels like just totally different and amazing. It's like I'm a stranger in my own home, in a good way. That makes sense. But
our home was finally interesting.
Yeah, seriously. That's about the only, maybe that's the only thing that makes it interesting now, but that withstanding. But yeah, I think you're completely right on the kind of, when you talked about how things go slower, that's very true. I mean, it's physically actually true. It can almost be a meditative thing in some ways, whether you're riding to get somewhere or you're just taking a ride to ride. Just feeling there's a physiological response you get from getting the vitamin D from the sun and just feeling the wind in your face. And
you got endorphins pumping. And one of my favorite things was always bringing up Google Maps when I was in Orlando and just pick a blue lake or a blue, like something blue that you've never been to, and like just find a road there, like find a ride there. And sometimes those were like a few miles away, and sometimes those were like 30 miles away, and it was a whole day, but those were amazing. Those were like, you get to pack in all the excitement of a major adventure, and you still get to go home at the end of the night, and you still get to, you go to work and you still do the whole thing, but you do have your little adventure.
I always feel kind of sad when I pass, which this happens quite a bit, I'll pass bus stops with people just waiting for the bus. And here in Orlando, we have the Lynx bus, and I cannot tell you how many times I lap this thing. And it's just, some of it's just Orlando is so spread out, and there's really no other choice. But some of it's just the sheer volume of stops that we have here. And
yeah, it's the same out here too.
I just think like, man, if we give these folks a bike, they would probably be where they're headed right now. But I mean, that's obviously a whole other tangent. But you know, it's just you feel I hate to use the word magical, but you brought it up earlier, so I'm blaming you.
Okay,
but yeah, I mean, there's a certain magic to it that like you want to impart, and I always feel that way about the folks at bus stop.
I will say, should anybody hear this, I will say that
should the 5 people that aren't our family and friends.
Joe, let me tell you this, Joe. I'll say this. There is a bar to entry for getting on a bicycle and riding it regularly, right? It's incredibly easy to, nobody would blame you for not following through, right? Like, so you say you get a bike, and it's like, you tried riding it a couple of times, and it's like your ass hurts and your legs are jelly, and you can't do it. Nobody would blame you for stopping. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you this though, that hurdle, that big wall that you're kind of up against it's a curb. It's really small, and you're going to get around that super quick. And once you do, that's when you start seeing things differently, and you start understanding that, like, while corny, it is a bit magical, at least at first it is. Yeah, I can't recommend it enough. It's been the one thing that I can point to that I can say without a doubt, it's definitely changed my life for the better. And, there's a lot of those things like anybody could probably point to in their life. But you're kind of like, okay, yeah, that's probably changed my life. Being on a bicycle full time has been nothing but for all the headaches and the constant death, that stares you in the face. It really is just, and it does. There just is nothing like it. So I can't recommend it enough. And I'd love to help other people kind of discover that as well.
Yeah. And we joke about that death thing, but it is that impactful that we would choose to do this thing in the face of how potentially dangerous it can be, which, by the way, the numbers show that it is not as dangerous as people think. I mean, of course, I say that with the obvious caveat, which we talked about this episode. LA is the most dangerous city, and sometimes you should walk. But wherever you're at, really, you're going to get a sixth sense about how dangerous something is. And the stats right now, and probably it's sheer numbers, it's more dangerous to be in a car. But yeah, that withstanding, speaking to those who have or have thought about maybe bike commuting, or have tried it and maybe stopped. It's funny you mentioned the ass hurting. That's always the number one thing, because that first week or so, it's the inside of your butt is just raw because it's not used to this like weird seat, this weird thin seat that seems like it shouldn't work, but after a while is like perfect.
You think that you want the big padded seat, and you don't. I promise you don't.
But yeah, it really is a beautiful thing. And as far as the bar of entry, I completely agree. It's very low. I'd say don't be afraid to get the Walmart bike. I'm always going to advocate for the local bike shop, but I know that can be cost prohibitive. So
yeah, I mean, and I would just underscore. I think you'll agree with me here, but I will just underscore: get the bike you can get.
Yeah.
If that's if it's the the $100, $80 bike at Walmart, then if that's the only thing that's available, like, get that bike. That's fine. I think that not enough people give credit to used bikes, myself included. And that's something I'm actually exploring, or starting to explore here in LA, is used bikes. And I'm finding it to be maybe a more supportive community than actual bike shops, which is something I didn't expect. But just get the bike you can get, find something on Craigslist, get the cheapy Walmart bike, learn how it brakes, learn it will, if anything else, it'll get you started, and it will highlight when you do get a better bike, it will highlight why that bike is better, and you'll know why it's better. And suddenly spending $200 on a bike isn't crazy. And then after that, spending $500 on a hybrid bike isn't crazy, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Get the bike you can, and then take that bike to the local bike shop and ride the better bikes and just get the A and B difference, because once you have that under your belt, and of course that's true for a lot of stuff, you know, it's especially true for bikes, because people usually at local bike shops can help fit a bike to you specifically.
That's the big thing is maybe, and perhaps that's what we should, that's something that I harp on when I'm talking to people face to face, and I'm a little ashamed we haven't brought it up yet, is bike fit. And we won't go deep into it, but just, there is a specific way that you are supposed to fit to a bike. And specifically, I see a lot of people, and this was me hands down across the board, sitting way too low, and your legs never, fully extend on their, like on the downstroke. And without getting crazy into it, it is mind blowing how many parts of your body are in pain simply by the height of your saddle.
Yeah.
It's incredible to me. Like, it blows my mind. And now it's like, if my saddle isn't, I have a dropper post, and unfortunately lately it's been sticking a little bit on the rebound, like when it comes up. If it does not come all the way up, I feel it immediately. Like, if my saddle height is not where I know it to be, I can feel it immediately. But yeah, so learn how to fit a bike. You can watch YouTube as well. That's always, go to YouTube University.
Yeah, for real. I mean, that's true of a lot of things, but as far as you learning how to fix things on YouTube, I'd say I've literally come across nothing that I haven't been able to figure out to fix on YouTube. There's definitely been little things like with cars or the house stuff where it's like, all right, there's a few videos and maybe all of them have a little bit you can get, but man, some of the bike repair videos are amazing.
Wouldn't it? I would love to be able to tell people to, and myself, like, to be able to tell myself that the best way to learn is to go to a bike shop. But you got to be lucky enough that you're near a local bike shop that's supportive and doesn't make you feel alienated, and kind of like what you're saying, like when you have the Walmart bike, you have a mongoose with some sick pegs on the back, bro.
Right.
And you go to a local bike shop, you ride up on that thing and you want to like test out other bikes. They'll happily let you do that. But so many bike shops will just, whether you recognize it or not, and usually you will, they'll look down their nose at you. If you're a bigger person, they'll push you towards, like maybe a safer, like a beach commuter style bike, instead of like an aggressive road bike, if that's what you wanted. Or, there's a lot of pure ego and, negativity that comes from a lot of bike shops. And I honestly think that local bike shops play a large role in sort of the view that I guess the negativity that's out there, or that the general public has towards bicyclists, especially like if they've tried to go in, and they've just been shit on by 2 or 3 bike shops. And, so that sucks. That being said, I don't want to demonize the local bike shop. I think you find every place I've been, I've went to a handful, and then you always find the one that's awesome. There's always an awesome local bike shop. Sometimes you got to dig for it. And when you do find it, it's so worth it. I've went in there. I've went into the bike shop here since I bought this. I bought this bike directly from them, and I went in there and I'm like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to set up suspension on my front fork. I've watched 15 hours of YouTube videos and I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, great, come on back, man. Let me show you why you suck at this. Like, which I appreciate. Amazing. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, please. And then they'll send me away and they'll give me like a little demonstration and then they'll send me away. They'll usually give me like, like a little free patch kit or something like that.
Man,
incredible. Just fantastic. Yeah.
And that is an incredible experience. Unfortunately, I think it's probably more the exception than the rule, because I'm thinking of you could have been another guy going in there, and the first thing, and if it's maybe a different tech, and the first thing he says, well, here's our suspension package and here's how much it'll cost. And
it's 100%, 100% the exception. Yeah. Totally the exception. And it probably doesn't help, or rather it doesn't hurt that I gave them $3,000.
Right.
Like
that never.
I mean, I gave them a lot of money, and I think that the second I was like, I'm going to buy it, because I walked in there just on my high horse. I was like, hey, what's your name? Oh, my name is Jeremiah. I'm going to buy this bike. Like, you need to special order this bike in this color with these specs. I want it as soon as possible. And, of course, they were my best friend immediately.
Yeah. Once you're willing to buy something. Yeah. I mean, and that's okay to some degree, I think. They need to make money, and a good way to make money is through repairs and repeat business like that. But there should be, and, to me, that's why I think a community model would work so much better, because it would be reversed. The rule would be that you would be shown how to do something, and maybe if you needed a tool or a part, then maybe we could make some kind of money off of that. And even then it could be some type of suggested donation situation.
I told you about that. There's that co-op here that is like completely volunteer run, and you do have to pass like a test. Like you come in, and you don't have to be like a mechanic expert or anything. If you have a base level knowledge, you can go in and you basically shadow a mechanic there, and then you get, you got to go through a couple of like small steps like that. But then you just sign up to do, they want you to do, like, if you can at least do 1 or 2 days a week, right? But we understand if you can't do a week, here and there or something like that. But you just volunteer your time. It's a 4-hour shift, and you go in, and all the parts are like donated parts, or you're taking apart broken bikes and recycling parts. And it's kind of like a free trade system too. Like, people can come in like just with parts and be like, can I trade this in for those handlebars or whatever it is? It's a really cool thing. And I've been dying to get down there, because start volunteering down there. I think that my knowledge, I'm totally selfish, because my knowledge would just go through the roof, I think. But what a cool system. I just thought that was amazing.
Yeah, and your knowledge would go through the roof, but you would then be incentivized to share that too, just through the virtue of where you got it from.
Right. And then you're around other people that also are like-minded in the fact that they want to share, and they want to teach, and they want to be useful, and hopefully improve the community that they're in by presumably recognizing there's a shared interest here, and promoting bicycles and being on bikes, and self-sufficient on your bike.
Yeah, for sure. And that place, it's called the Bicycle Kitchen, right?
It's called no. I think that's it. I think it's called the Bicycle. It is called the Bicycle Kitchen. Yeah, and it's here in Los Angeles. It's here in Los Angeles. It's over on Fountain Avenue, which is in kind of like the heart of, I might get this wrong, it's in the heart of like Los Feliz, which is basically, it's the home of the, for those of you who have never been here, it's the home of the Griffith Observatory, among many other things. So you've actually probably seen Los Feliz in a lot of movies. But if you get a chance, you should go on Google. Like, if you Google, they have plenty of pictures on their Google page, like when you just look them up on Google. And they're so cool. There's just tons of, I think there's one picture of a couple kids that, came in and tried to get some parts or something. And I don't know, people just cobbled together bikes, like pieces that shouldn't go together. And I love it.
That's awesome. The creative aspect here is just like, it's amazing. And it's something I wish I could get more into. But for me, it's all about riding and, just trying to fix people's flats and little things like that come up around the college. I feel like it's taken the bike back from the hipster a little bit, which I am always all about. So, which probably makes me more hipster.
I will, right, of course. Like, you're the new age hipster. I will say this: there are more free hub. They call them. I hear people around here call them free hub fixies, but that just doesn't make any sense. They're just the single speed free hubs. The $150 bikes with the colored rims. They're just everywhere around here. And on one hand, people are riding, so I shouldn't throw stones, right? I'm happy that people are riding. But God, I just wish they weren't riding that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know we're running a bit long. I wanted to touch on, there was one topic that I desperately wanted to touch on. So we spent a couple minutes. I wanted to ask you about, because it's something I struggle with quite a bit, is the motivation, right? And we have touched on it like a little bit here and there, but like I'm talking like losing. Sometimes I just lose the passion for riding, right? And I think it's just because I'm like caught up in what I'm doing, right? I'm caught up in my life, going to work, commuting, all this thing. And when you go too utilitarian with it and you lose that, like you don't go for just rides just for yourself anymore. I tend to lose that, you know, that love and feeling. So I was wondering if you experience the same thing. You basically are forced to ride, right? Like I have the ability to take a train and Uber and all this other stuff. You're in your saddle far more than I am. And I was wondering if you ever experienced the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I recall once I was dating a girl who wanted to go on bike rides a lot. And I couldn't believe that I was hesitant to say, maybe not. And it was a little bit of a contentious thing, but it was really just more me realizing like, no, Aaron, you ride all the time. You're on your bike all the time. And this person just wants to do it for leisure and fun. And that was the first time I realized like, okay, this is kind of what this is to me. It's the only other times I can think of where it really grinded at me. I took a trip to Miami on my bike. As you may recall, I went to visit you.
I do remember.
Yeah, that was quite the little trek. And for me, it was kind of to test the waters because when I graduate, I want to do a very long kind of across the United States bike trip. That would be a big, huge dream and goal of mine. But basically, there were times on the bike where I just absolutely hated it. I hated every second of it, and I wanted to just stop. And
was it just boredom, or was it like fatigue? Was it a combination of things like that?
It was definitely, I would say it's at least 80%. From what I recall, for me, it was 80% fatigue, and I was hitting wind big time. One of the beautiful things about Florida is that it's flat as a pancake, so there's no hills. There's just really wind and other things like rain that will get in the way. But this is after a whole day of having the wind hit me, and it was just relentless. The sun is in your eyes, and I felt like, man, what the hell am I doing? You know? And eventually, though, what happens is the sun goes down, and you get that, and the wind stops a little bit, and it's just euphoria. It's just so crazy how in a single day I would go from that low to that high, and just I remember just singing on my bike like an idiot, you know, without any music, just being so happy, like, you know, like the sky the sun went down to some degree, or it was overcast, and the wind let up, and it was like, oh my God, it was just such a great feeling. So I know you asked if it, you know, for the pure miserable stuff, but they kind of go hand
for sure.
in hand.
Because I had an ill-fated trip myself, which is an entire other podcast. But but I remember a lot of those same things where I did like 70 miles my first day, and I think before that my longest ride was like 20 miles, and I just pushed because I think it was that I didn't want to admit that I was scared, so I just rode as hard as I could, right? And I totally gassed myself. I remember just a monstrous roller coaster, jubilant. I mean, and I've never I don't think I've ever described my mood as jubilant before, but I was jubilant, yes. And then just like completely depressed, you know, and then just like bored, and then like terrified. I remember being terrified, like absolute scared out of my mind, riding on this country road in near Ocala, Florida, and I'm alone. I don't see any place I just said, okay, I'm just going to go to a motel. There was no motels, right? And then it was like, okay, well, I could just dip into the woods, but it was all farmland and it was all fenced off. Mm-hmm. And I just remember that, like, the sun's going down. My God, what a huge mistake. And I'm not even like, I can't even bike back at this point. I eventually found a place to pitch my tent, and that feeling of waking up in the morning and the sun is on your tent and you're like, oh, I'm still alive. Oh, that's cool. You know, like, things are probably fine. Like, I'm sore. I am starving. You know, I didn't pack right. No, I didn't do any of this right. but
Mm-hmm.
I'm alive. And I just remember that feeling of like just being all over that emotional map. But I remember the entire time not being excited about being on a bike. And I think that was like the first thing in my head where I was like, this is not, I shouldn't be doing this. You know, I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I wasn't prepared. I wasn't like, I no longer romanticize that, the solo bike trip. I've read so many books about it, and I've watched so many programs and talked to so many people who have done it. And it always seems so romantic. And I no longer romanticize it. I think that I'm much happier riding with somebody. But a little bit off track there. But to bring it back home, I was thinking sometimes I feel guilty for not riding my bike. Do you ever feel that? Like,
You know, honestly, I don't as much because like you mentioned earlier, I'm definitely more of a situation where I have to ride my bike. I don't have as immediate access to like Lyft or Uber. Sometimes I will rent a car. That's another option I have. But the hassle to rent a car is so much that it's,
right.
I really need a good reason to rent a car.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I haven't come across that quite as much. I can definitely understand how it could get that way, how you have no motivation to get in the saddle and to do anything.
Yeah. I mean, like all I want to do is go ride, and there's no place to ride in LA, you know? And I know that's kind of a piss poor excuse because you can and I've torn around this city on my mountain bike just endlessly, and I'll continue to do it. But not having a car or a way to get to trails, you know, I can take the train on a weekend. I could like maybe go all the way to the coast and like ride on the coast. That's not a bad option. But like, I don't know, the accessibility isn't there. And I find myself like when the accessibility is low, I'm just less apt to go the extra mile, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there has to be just to commuters like us. I think it's healthy to mix up your commute with cool things. Like for me, for example, I'll go to this place called Wekiva Island. It's a state park that's fairly close, and it's a great trip. It's what is it? I think 13 or 16 miles there and back. But there's a spring basically at the end, and you get to go swimming, and it's like this great little reward. Another fun thing to do is just to go downtown and ride your bike around there and kind of zip through the crowds and through the parks there. That can be pretty fun. So it's definitely a good thing to mix things up when you can. And sometimes that's hard to do, especially if doing this more from the utilitarian side. And I really am glad that you mentioned the part about romanticizing the thing, because that's definitely something, as highly as we speak of this magical experience, we try to illustrate too that it can be terrible and draining and just like, ugh. And I think anybody who enjoys something, who has it as a part of their life and identity, that's going to be a normal thing to have happen. Like certainly with me, sometimes with music, for example, I love listening to music and playing it when I can, but there's a dread that comes along. For example, sometimes I'll feel when I perform music of, that will come over me like, was this good enough? And what am I doing? And all this crazy self-doubt that I'm not always sure where it comes from.
Right. That like, you're like, there's no reason I should be up here.
Yeah.
I do not like what makes me what makes me think I deserve to be up here right now.
Yeah. But it's a great thing you mentioned that, just because to take this on as a lifestyle is to understand that you'll go through these ebbs and flows with it, and
then still do it. Like that's I mean, and I think that for me, that was when it clicked, right? It was like after going through a couple rounds of those types of ebbs and flows, and it's like, oh, but I'm still on the bike, like I still get excited about my bike. And, my girlfriend will tell you like, she had to house me and my bike for, 4 months, and I will stare at my bike the same way I stare at her sometimes. So, but it is gorgeous. It's a beautiful bike.
And name your bike, people. If you personify your bike, it will help you. Trust me. I know it sounds dumb. Like, what does that mean? Like, my bike's name is Tori with an I, and she has this great backstory.
With an I. Okay,
she's
every
a little
time
bad
I hear you
girl.
Say that, every time I hear you say that, she's got like a little velvet mini red skirt on. I don't know why. like Tori, like a Tori Spelling type of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. You invent this whole story. You know, she's got the velvet skirt. She's like smoking and checking her phone a lot. She's got baggage, but
she's always standing outside in the rain.
Yeah, like, but she's still, you know, happy to see you and happy to take you where you need to.
Hey, buddy, you want to have a good time? Eh?
Right. So, like, my first bike was named Caroline, and she was a sweet girl, you know, just fresh off of.
She was a sweet girl.
You know, yeah, she's, you know, fresh out of college, and she's from a small town, and she's ready to settle down. But Tori's this whole other character. You know, I know how to take care. I know how to take care of her now. You know, I'm older and I've learned more about bikes. I don't know. I mean, I could go on and on about this, but
this character development is more than 3-dimensional. I promise.
Yeah. This will be a whole other podcast where we literally spend an hour and a half talking about like the characters we've made up for our bicycles. That's not insane at all.
We should start a separate podcast. It's all character. All right. Yeah. And it's the only characters are our bikes, and it's our bikes having podcasts about us.
Yeah. Oh, that's even better. Yeah.
Isn't that good?
We play the bikes talking about us.
Yeah.
It's meta as shit.
And then you and I will happily be the only people listening to it. It'll be fine. It'll be great. It'll be art. We'll call it art. That kind of thing passes for art around here. So.
Yeah. Anything is art.
Anything is art. All right, my man. Well, I think I gotta get ready for bed.
Well, thank you so much, Jeremiah, for being on our humble little podcast. And if Kenny were here, he would just be talking about his kind of crappy little bike he's had since he was 14 and how great that is.
There's this part of me that loves that he's had it that long.
Yeah. I think he'd be a great devil's advocate, actually. I'm kind of sad he missed this one, but.
Well, we should, let's do another one. It doesn't have to be bike centric, but we can talk bike stuff. And it would certainly be good to get the boys back together for sure.
Absolutely. And is there anything you want to plug or mention before we go?
If you're looking for any type of motivation that's like down to earth from like a contemporary adventure standpoint, the guy that whose writing and videos got me into more adventurous bicycling is a guy named Alistair Humphreys. And I'll let you discover him on your own, but he did cycle the world across 4 years, around it. And he's done plenty other adventures that are not bike specific, but he's got a strong affinity for bicycles, and I take great inspiration from him still to this day. So give him a little look-see.
Excellent. All right. Yeah, I'll check that out. And that'll do it for this episode of Things We Think About. I'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed the podcast, remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find more Things We Think About discussion on Reddit at r/Things We Think About. If you're interested in contributing to the show, our Patreon information is available in the description of the podcast, as well as on any of our YouTube videos.